I'd now like to change the subject completely and ask Gavin Lister, Rachel de Lambert and Alan Titchener to come up onto the stage, please. I'm sure you're all aware that these three landscape architects have collaborated on the recent publication of the landscape assessment guidelines, which they're going to tell you all about.
Yeah, so it's with a little bit of discomfort that I return to the lectern. Thank you, Elena, for, as we would expect of you, laying down the taiaha. I think we all know we have a lot of work to do, but I think, trustfully, pretty much all of us in this room are actually part of really wanting to continue to advance these difficult conversations and to move ourselves individually and our collective practice forward. So, we three, as we have become now accustomed, are going to speak together to you. I'm going to make some introductory remarks and reflections in terms of the publication of Te Tangi Ata Manu. Gavin is going to talk to some points, and I won't explain to them what they are so that he can do that reveal, and Alan will round out with some of the challenges and opportunities as we see them in respect of the bicultural underpinning of Te Tangi Ata Manu. So before I start though, there are a couple of things from yesterday that I just want to have my moment to respond to. And one of those, thank you Stephen Brown, is that Te Tangi Ata Manu is not a straitjacket. In fact, it's written specifically to avoid that, so don't be distracted by that suggestion. Secondly, Te Tangi Ata Manu is not an end, it's a beginning, and it's a step along the way. We know practice will evolve, we will evolve, and the guidelines will need to be updated. So don't feel that because we published a book we've got there. In fact, it's only just the beginning. And the third thing is that whilst Te Tangi Ata Manu might be finding a wider audience, it was written for a very specific purpose, so come back to remembering that. It says in the preface, these are guidelines for landscape assessment in a statutory planning context in Aotearoa, New Zealand. That's their real purpose. So, the more observant amongst you will also notice that I'm talking to a revolving series of slides. I'm avoiding the clicker problem that everybody has, including Frank yesterday, by doing that. They revolve every 6 seconds, there are 73 of them, and at the end of that, my 7 minutes will be up. Gavin will take over. So in publishing Te Tangi Ata Manu, there were some things that were really important to us. The text alone can be dry, and we wanted the opportunity to do some more with the book. We wanted the graphic design to be part of the communication tool, and we acknowledge again the real skill of the Isthmus graphic design team, Nick, Sam, Sophie, in delivering that with us. So what were those things that we really wanted to convey through the publication of Te Tangi Ata Manu? Firstly, we wanted to convey that we are all designers. The landscape assessors no less so than the designers and the drawers, that planning and design go together in landscape architecture. They're hand in hand, they're two sides of the same coin, and that one benefits from the other. We also wanted to take the opportunity to lavishly illustrate the book with the images of our Aotearoa landscape, not just the outstanding ones, but the everyday landscapes that make our lives. The urban landscapes, the wild and the cultured nature, but also across the scales of landscape, from the enormous to the very detailed. These things inform our appreciation of our landscape, and we wanted to convey them. We wanted to reinforce also that we analyse and communicate through drawing, and that drawing engages the brain in a different way, and that it helps us distill the essence of landscape, and we wanted to encourage you all to keep drawing as part of your practice. We wanted to weave in those ancient proverbs, the whakatauki, and to include them through the text in a way that speaks to the landscape, to the people and to the content of Te Tangi Manu, and to make those Te Ao Māori connections throughout Te Tangi Manu. And lastly, we wanted to reinforce the message that Te Tangi Manu isn't about the three of us. It's been a collective effort. And so in the same way as you've all contributed to the content of Te Tangi Manu, the graphic illustrations have come from you all, and trustfully many of you can see yourselves in them, and to reinforce that this is, in fact, our collective taonga. So Te Tangi Manu has now been out in the world for 7 weeks since its launch on the 26th of August, with that beautiful blessing by Mātua Hare Williams, who sent Te Tangi Manu out into the world. And I'm sad, or in fact I'm exceptionally happy to say, that the 400 printed copies, which we thought was a real stretch target for us, are essentially, I think, all but gone. Yesterday, I believe there were 20 still in sale mode, now 10. So if you don't have one and you want one, get in quick. But the important thing also is that freely available to everybody on the website is the PDF version. So since the launch, we have presented to the 3 landscape architecture schools in Aotearoa, Te Whanganui Tara and Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, and the schools and the branches in those cities, and also to the branch in Whakatu, Nelson. Tuia, Pito have also gifted a number of copies, 71 I think, across a broad spectrum, some in thanks for the effort and contribution by people to Te Tangi Manu, and others out to allied professions, including, I'm pleased to say, to the judges of the Environment Court, but also the NZPI, RMLA and similar organisations to get Te Tangi Manu out into that wider audience. So, and the feedback we are getting is that Te Tangi Manu is as much about landscape and understanding where we are as a society in respect of our bicultural understanding as it is about a methodology for landscape assessment. And as such, it does have a much wider audience. It seems like landscape is a very accessible lens for people to understand our changing society, and that through appreciating other people's perspectives, our own understanding can be improved and enriched. So mostly across this very wide audience, I think we feel really happy that the students of landscape architecture, that for them there's a single reference now that captures where we are today in respect of understanding of a bicultural Aotearoa perspective on landscape, and the tools that we use in our practice. And I think we all wish that we had that reference in our own time. So I was struck on Tuesday evening when Mātua Hare Williams, when he was speaking on acceptance of his award, when he spoke about as a child that entering the school environment, for him that was a transition from sunny blue skies into a dark black sky. That was the era in Aotearoa when Māori was not spoken in schools. In fact, it wasn't encouraged to be spoken at all. But Hare, I find an amazing mentor because he is always so positive about the future, and his transition or his evolution into a teacher and then a very respected leader and educationalist, and his speaking about the positive change that is happening in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and is continuing to happen. And it made me reflect that I grew up, like many of you, or some of you in this room, in 1960s and 70s New Zealand. I grew up in Christchurch, and where and how I grew up, there was a perception that to meet Māori, you needed to go to the North Island. That there wasn't a Māori culture in Christchurch, or the way I was brought up in the South Island. And it wasn't until I started landscape architecture school with Neil Challenger, the year after Charlie retired, that I went down the road from where I went to school in Springfield Road to Reku Marae, and with Neil did a weaving course and some of my first interaction with te reo. So I guess, you know, in my 60 years, I can fully know the change that I and us collectively have been on. I know that that journey is only in its infancy, and there's a lot more to do. And I hope that for all of us, Te Tangi Manu is one vessel to help us move forward in that way. So, I've gone over time. Yes, we have a little bit more. I'll let you click the next clip.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Okay, so tēnā koutou. Rather than talk about what's in Te Tangi Manu, what we wanted to do this morning was just to share 10 points about the guidelines in order to kind of show what that says about our collective practice. And I think, first of all, Te Tangi Manu is the collective practice of our profession that has evolved here over the last 50 years. And it is special, it's internationally significant. And I think several people yesterday referred to that. I think Frank, Simon and Stephen all mentioned that. And we can say that because in writing the guidelines, we reviewed all the international guidelines in English that we could find. Now we struggled to find a way to say this because it is not to be presumptuous at all. That is not the reason. But it's to recognise that what we have is special so that we nurture it because it warrants nurturing. Just scattered some pictures through the middle, so because it is pretty dry, as Rachel said. Perhaps the headline fact about Te Tangi Manu is that it does attempt a bicultural approach to landscape assessment. So it is the treaty relationship expressed with respect to landscape assessment. And the way that we attempted to do it was to weave it through the whole book. So there is a specific Te Ao Māori chapter, but that content goes to the whole guideline. And that's part of the journey, and it is the start of a journey, as Rachel said, and as David was talking about yesterday, it's part of the journey. This is one of Stephen Brown's beautiful photos. This was the photo that was given to Harry Williams when he launched the Te Tangi Manu. Okay, but that's not the only thing, and here is the really important point. Both parties benefit from the relationship. So landscape assessment is better because of two perspectives. And it's not just that we get more from our landscapes, that they seem richer. It improves our assessment methods themselves. So our practice here is internationally significant because it attempts a bicultural approach, but also because of the concepts and the principles and the methods that go with that, and those things are related. And one of those benefits is that we get, in a pretty clear-eyed way, I think, that landscape is cultural, and Di touched on this yesterday. So seeing something through another's eyes allows us more easily to see our own cultural lens. You know, just in the same way that we hear our own accent when we're overseas, if you like. So lenses can distort, you know, and it's helpful to understand that distortion. It's helpful to hear our own accent, but they also magnify and reveal. There's 10 of these points, by the way, so you can judge where we are in the scheme. So because we get that landscape is cultural, we therefore also get what makes landscapes special, because landscapes are people. It's not just the physical environment. So we in Aotearoa, I think, are more primed to see beyond the aesthetic and the physical environment to the meanings that we associate with people, the meaning we associate with places. So we kind of get the whole landscape. And when you look overseas, other places struggle with that. They kind of realise that they need to get there, but it's just not as obvious, I think. It also means that we tend to have a more integrated idea of landscape, so we assess the whole landscape. So we're more likely to integrate objective and subjective, the tangible and the intangible. We are more likely, and this is increasingly so, to see visual as part of landscape, not as these kind of two separate things. To understand that values and character are interwoven. It's not one and then the other. And also to harness the power of both design and planning, as Rachel was saying, because that's where we have the most influence. That's where we can do our best stuff. And just to follow up on a point that was raised yesterday, Te Tangi Ata Manu is adamant that landscape includes urban areas. So it's not, and by that we don't just mean the green bits in cities. It means the streets and the buildings and the activities, and it's the same conceptual framework for landscape everywhere. So I think let's not talk ourselves out of urban design. I think actually, fortunately, it's an issue for my generation, and the younger people that we see coming through our studios don't have that same issue. And related to that is that we also get that values derive from context. So the things that make landscape special in this place are often unique to this place, or at least the combination of things. And therefore we're inclined to look at specific character and specific values rather than generic attributes. And that's an important point about our practice here. So for example, when we come to natural character, rather than generic naturalness per se, we are more likely to focus on the specific natural characteristics and qualities of a place. And those things also go to our approach to methodology. So Shona McCann in one of the workshops that we did commented that as a profession we have stopped trying to please others who wanted an objective formula for landscape, or at least that's what we thought they wanted. It probably wasn't actually. And she said, that we had come of age. So no formula. Instead, the mantra throughout Te Tangi Ata Manu that's repeated over and over, that it's about transparency and reasons. So I've got notes here to talk about the straitjacket as well, Rachel. So if it is a straitjacket, then the three of us will have absolutely failed. I don't think we have. So is the bar too high? Also, there was another point that was made. Well, we set out to try and distill the highest common ground, not the lowest common denominator. So I find it daunting. I feel not fully equipped, but that's fine as long as we don't let perfect stand in the way of better. And uniquely amongst the guidelines that we are aware of, all those ones that we could find from overseas, Te Tangiata Manu starts from why we do landscape assessment rather than how we do it. So, and we do it to improve landscape values. That's the kind of the heart thing. That's why we're in this game. But in a statutory planning situation, which is what Te Tangiata Manu is about, we do that only by helping the decision makers to that end. So that's a key point. And Te Tangiata Manu extends that principle that it should apply to everybody else who's involved in that statutory planning process. So lay people should be able to understand what we are saying, and get it, and other experts and so on. And so that drives the way that we do landscape assessment. Those qualities that are talked about right at the front of being skilled and clear and succinct and straightforward and balanced and pertinent, and all the rest of it. And then finally, as we say, Te Tangiata Manu brings together a distinctive practice that we as a profession have evolved here over 50 years. And it's important that we keep on. We don't want Te Tangiata Manu to mean that we get stuck in 2022. And when you look overseas to other countries, they tend to get stuck at the point at which they prepare guidelines. So we absolutely don't want that to happen. So we hope that Te Tangiata Manu is a platform that gathers our best practice, that it's an open approach, that it promotes the flexibility and the variety that is essential for evolution to continue. And in one of the articles that Simon and others wrote, he used the evolution by natural selection analogy to talk about how we had been free in Aotearoa to experiment and have variety of approaches, and then the natural selection that was applied by the Environment Court. So I'll leave it with that. Thank you.
Ai te tau, o te hokinga mai o te pipi parau roa. Mihi mai, mihi mai, mihi mai. Mihi mai a koutou. Ngā mana whenua. Ka nui te mihi ki a koutou mō tō awhinatanga mea tō tautokotanga. Mō tēnei o tātou te whānau o Tuia Pito ora ki tēnei o tātou hui rā whānau rima te kau i tēnei wā. Mērera, mihi mai, karanga mai. Koutou mā, o mā, o Tuia Pito ora. Ka nui te mihi ki a koutou hoki. Aha koa kia hau, e titiro nei, all of you, koutou katoa, koutai mai nei, tēnā koutou, kia ora koutou katoa. I started with a recognition that this is the time of the year when the pipi wharauro arrives back in Aotearoa, having spent the last few months in the relative warm climes of Solomon Islands. We were discussing that. We thought that's not a bad kind of program to be part of. Spend 2 or 3 months up in the Solomons and then come back when the day is getting longer. But it's a time traditionally for preparing the gardens for planting, because in those days, of course, the plants that were used were taro and yam and kumara, and it was a matter of survival to get that job done properly and at the right time. So the pipi whararoa came back, and with its song. Those of you who know the song, that you hear it this time of year. So as the karaua that I used to sit beside on the pai at my little marae at Pukeahu, he explained to me, "Hey boy, it's time for you to get your spuds in." So I'm using that as a call to draw on the. I've got to try and I'm the same team as Frank, but there's our pipi wharaurō, eh? So I'm drawing on the wisdom of two of my heroes. Dame Anne Salmond, I'm sure you all know of her, anthropologist and environmentalist, writer, and in her Justice Sir Joe Williams, of course, a member of the Supreme Court, having come through the ranks and working some of his time in the Model Land Court, and who, drawing on Anne Salmond in an afterword in her wonderful book, Tears of Rangi, she says, "It is possible to see the links between human communities, land and sea, as patterned by complex, multidimensional, dynamic systems in which people are related to other life forms and our fates are tied together." And just to reflect on that, I think it's so much in that, eh? And it's kind of goes to the core of what Te Tangata Manu is trying to achieve. It's also at the core of what Elena was saying so eloquently earlier. And I just want to say I tautoko everything she said. We might, and Dame Anne goes further to say, we might experiment with more egalitarian, inclusive patterns of governance and relations among land, sea, men, women and children, based upon ideas of manakitanga, that's mutual caring, looking after each other, and he whenua rangatira, a prosperous, abundant country where people live in peace. And I think if we do pick up the whittle that Elena put down, hopefully that will be the outcome. Justice Williams, I attended a lecture that he presented at the Eastern Institute of Technology in Napier some years ago. Terrific. I went away really, really inspired. And you can find it actually on the, if you Google Justice Williams, you'll find it. It's in amongst the material there that explains who he is and what he believes. But it was entitled Managing the Collision Between Two Worlds. And he drew on his understanding of history and tikanga and law. And tells the story of the first settlers, first human settlers in Aotearoa. Oops, I think I've done something wrong there. Never mind. I'll go back because I want it. And of those brave explorers, first of whom was Kupe, travelling on. Something is really weird here. Oh, is it? Can I? All right. So I'll have to go back and forth. Eh? But anyway, he came aboard a ship. Does anyone know the name of that twin hulled ocean go? Or hands up those who do know the name of the waka that he travelled to Aotearoa. Kia ora, Mata Whaurua, aye. So not many hands went up, just saying, and I wouldn't have known either, you know. So we're a big family in that one. But subsequently, of course, we know about Tasman as well. But the waka that brought the really different society and to Aotearoa was the one that captained by James Cook, Captain James Cook. Hands up, who knows the name of that waka? Pretty much all of us, Endeavour. So that's kind of indication again of what Elaine is saying. And so both those groups of people brought with them their way of living and their norms. And both of them had to adapt to a very different environment when they got here, and subsequently needed to adapt to each other. And that's, again, part of the issues that we're trying to deal with in Te Tangata Manu. Those blending together of those two ways of looking at the whenua, the landscape, based on korero tuku iho, whakapapa, hikoi, biophysical, perceptual and associative values. Anyway, Justice Williams pointed to the breakdown of tikanga. Through that clash or collision between those two worlds, the breakdown of tikanga that had underpinned the way of living of that first group, including whānaungatanga, tapu, concepts of tapu, utu, kaitiakitanga, that are embodied in all of those whakatau ki, that weave their way through the book. Those whakatau ki that are a response to that adjusting and adapting to this environment. And Justice Williams identified a new legal culture that was evolving, derived from a collective influence of the treaty settlements, the rediscovery of native title in areas such as fisheries, foreshore and seabed, rivers and water. And we think of, for example, Te Awatupua, me te Uruwera, as examples of those. In recognition of tikanga in land management, such as the Ture Whenua Act, the environmental management, our much criticised resource management Act, and in family law, the children, young persons and family, and whānau ora as being examples of that. And he put forward the proposition that if we are to achieve a really successful society, then whanaungatanga solutions need to be at the core of that. Since the breakdown of whanaungatanga is a critical component of the problem in the first place. So Te Tangata Manu, in our view, sits very comfortably within that vision of Justice Williams, as a weaving or a binding together of various strands of knowledge and mātauranga, held collectively by various assessors. And one of the key points that we make in Te Tangata Manu is that landscape architects, although we are technically equipped to undergo landscape assessment, we don't have sole rights to that process, and that Pukenga and other members of the community have a very important and very valid role to play in that. But we've been really gratified in the number of people and the breadth of professions who have, or disciplines, who have seen in Te Tangata Manu things that are relevant to their walks of life and the work that they do. No wonder that those 400 copies have been snapped up so quickly. And as part of, although Dame Anne talks of manaakitanga, and of course she doesn't limit it to that alone, drawing on Justice Williams, I'd add I'd like to add whanaungatanga, kaitiakitanga, and of course, so many others of those concepts. There's a saying, is there for people a kindlier state than times which songbirds dominate? I love sitting in the morning, this time of year, I call it the pai, just outside my kitchen, as the night is going, the Ruru's finished his shift, and the Tuia starts up. And gradually the other birds join in. And eventually out comes the song thrush. And he says, "You guys think you've got it? Well, wait until you hear a bit of this." And he gets up on the highest spot and away he goes. And as Browning says, there's the wise thrush. He sings his song twice over, lest you should think he could never recapture that first fine, careless rapture. So to conclude and celebrate, let's sing a waiata together and sing it twice over. I can ask you to stand, and I think we'll have some words up on the screen. Tuia mai te waka nei, ku mea mai te waka nei. Ki te takoto rangai takoto ai, tiriti te mana motu hake te Tangi a te Manu nei. Pipi wharauro, kui, 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 whiti ora, hui e taiki e. Ako! Tuia mai te waka nei, ku mea mai te waka nei. I te takoto rangai takoto ai, tiriti te mana motu hake te Tangi a te Manu nei. Pipi wharauro, kui, 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 whiti ora, hui e taiki e. Hui e taiki e. Ka piti hono tātai hono, te hunga mate ki te hunga mate. Ka piti hono tātai hono, te hunga ora ki te hunga ora. A tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa kahuri.